we were the first really airborne combat troops, and we were participating in the first use of helicopters in warfare.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first air cav was just the start of that. What happened is that we were given maps, and I was a lieutenant, so that was with our company and given maps. Okay, we're going to deploy to here and here, because there's been some activity out there, and we're trying to find the base camp of the North Vietnamese. We knew they were there. They would come in and then they would disappear. But these were pretty big units. These were battalion-sized units. Mm-hmm. And so we went out and we were going around, and all of a sudden we got orders. Boom, we found them. Now we're going to go into the Chupong Massif. And so the maps all changed. They came and got us. The helicopters started moving around, and boom, we went in. And Hal Moore, in the 1st of the 7th Cavalry, were the first ones into the Ia Drang Valley. Mm-hmm. And they went into an LZ called X-Ray. And that really is a kind of a famous, well-known in military history location. And they were engaged with the North Vietnamese. They got into some real trouble. Hal was doing a heck of a job. Mm-hmm. He was a tremendous combat leader. And then they got the 2nd of the 7th, which was where I was, to go in and reinforce the 1st of the 7th. And at that time, I'd been moved into a recon platoon leader. So when we went to the first LZ X-Ray, big X-Ray, and they were just fighting all around, and I was right with Hal, was right there, because I was a recon platoon, and when they would break through a perimeter, the recon platoon would move into that and engage the enemy and push them back out. And that's where I first met Hal. Heck of a place to meet. But he was a West Pointer, tremendous human being.
He's often credited with being the would it be the father of the air cav?
I would say that, because number one, he was part of the officer corps. Now, he was a lieutenant colonel at the time, mm-hmm. but at Fort Benning, he was involved in doing the testing for everything. Mm-hmm. So he gets over there, and he's got the 1st of the 7th, because mm-hmm. he was the guy, and I was in the 2nd of the 7th, and there was a 3rd, and et cetera. And that's really a good name for him, for being the father, because in combat. Now, I don't know who thought of this. Maybe he did. I'm not sure who thought about it. Mm. But he was the first spearhead that led the 1st Cav into combat with the North Vietnamese. And he cannot get too much credit. Mm-hmm. He really can. He was a fantastic human being. We felt like that he was the finest combat battalion commander. And he wasn't a John Wayne kind of guy. I mean, he could be if he wanted to. Mm-hmm. But he was the kind of guy that was thinking, what could happen? Okay, I better make sure. And when they got into trouble, there was a code name, and I'm trying to remember it right now. I can't think of the name of it, but they were just about to get overrun. And he used this code name that brought every active aircraft in Vietnam to his rescue.
Would that be a Broken Arrow?
Broken Arrow, that was it. He said Broken Arrow. He called him Broken Arrow. And then that's when we were notified as 2nd and 7th, hey, you're going to go in there and help them out, because when we got there, I mean, there were airplanes going. It was a heck of a deal to get into, I'll tell you. And then he got us in, and then he positioned us, et cetera. And then they finally decided, and I guess he was part of this too, to bomb the Chupong Massif with B-52s, and that caused another stuff. But yes, I was there.
So X-Ray, was that the first what they refer to as a hot LZ that you went into?
Yeah, it really was.
What's your impression of hitting a hot LZ? I mean, what's going through your mind?
Well, number one, it was when we got in, the LZ was so hot, they couldn't land in it. Mm. So we walked into the LZ.
So how far away do they drop you to walk in?
Oh, several miles.
Oh, okay.
I mean, because we knew there was a fight going on at LZ, but there's a lot of territory.
Sure.
So we walked in there. I'd say it took us a half a day to move in. Okay. We had 400 people, something like that. And but when we got there, though, We had 2 or 3 helicopter pilots that were given the Congressional Medal of Honor because after I got there, they were flying in. They were flying in supplies because we were running out of ammunition. So equally important, if not more so, they were taking our casualties out. But there were only certain periods of time, and these guys, these pilots, and there were 3 of them, and I met them all eventually because we had reunions and everything. They really were unbelievable people.
How does a 23-year-old come to terms and grips with walking into a battle that's been raging already, has gone off the rails, and we're here to help? How do you compartmentalize that?
Well, several things. So number one is the North Vietnamese were coming off the Chupong Massacre. So they would come down, and you could actually hear them because they were getting in position, et cetera. And then when they would start, remember, we were bringing artillery fire on them. We were bringing aircraft in to shoot them up, et cetera. But there would be pauses because they weren't like, it wasn't like World War II where they were all 40,000 guys were running into each other. They were up in there, and they were trying to figure out how to get into, and they did probing attacks, and we would hold them off. Then they would make major runs at us. That's when Hal did the broken arrow thing, and then that's when I got involved into it. You know, it's really interesting. That's a very interesting question because what saved me and a lot of my friends who are lieutenants like me was going to Ranger School. Ranger School was 9 weeks long, and you're out there and you're living off the ground, you're walking around in the swamps, and it challenges you to be able to think in combat. When you're tired, you're barely awake, you're hungry, you know, nerves are rattled. And they did a great job of Ranger training before we got there. That helped me immensely, and it helped the other people. And we were able to convey that to our men. And these young men, like I'm 23, well, I got 18 and 19-year-old infantry guys. And these were a lot of draftees, and they were terrific. They really were good. I mean, as I look back on it, the fact that we hung together, made it work, and fought, and you know, some battles we won, some battles we lost, but they were terrific people. But what held us together was the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers. The non-commissioned officer for me had been in Korea, right? So he had been in that, and so we relied on the non-commissioned officers a tremendous amount, and they were really good. And the men, they were the link to the men, and I would say that was a really saving grace in the first Cav.
So you mentioned that you were in that. There's another battle you were in a couple weeks later.
Well, it was several days later.
Several days later.
Yeah. What happened is that when number one, we had pretty well held off the North Vietnamese in X-ray. You know, it got to be where it was because we had the aircraft there, we had the artillery there, et cetera. And they wanted to bomb them, and that's when the B-52s were called in. So what happens is Hal Moore says, all right, look, the 2nd and the 7th is going to stay here. We're going to take our troops out. They had earned the right to, you know, you can't just stay there, you know, for a year by yourself. You have to go back to troops, casualties, et cetera, regroup. So the 2nd and the 7th stayed there. Hal gets on the airplane, leaves, and we are to move about a day away. I'm not exactly sure, to a new LZ called LZ Albany. Now, the real reason we ran was the B-52s, you know, you don't know how accurate the B-52s are. So, I mean, you know, we didn't want to be there when they were dropping these bombs for umpteen thousand feet. Right. So they moved us out into a holding position. They said, look, you go ahead and take your recon platoon up there and go through that. So I got up there with my recon platoon, 30, 40 guys. And we also had with us A Company, which was my old company. And we had a couple of platoons of those guys. So we got up and found the LZ and said, okay, we got the LZ. What we didn't know is we had marched, we were within 200 yards of about over 1,000 North Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. Because what had happened was, not only had we called for reserves to help us at X-ray, so had the North Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. So these were North Vietnamese regulars coming up to head into X-ray. Okay. And their communications wasn't nearly as good as ours. They didn't know it was going to get bombed by a bunch of B-52s. Mm-hmm. But we had walked within several hundred yards of over 1,000 North Vietnamese. We didn't know this at the time. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was the battalion commander, if Hal Moore had been there, this would not have happened. Mm. I'm convinced of that. Okay. And our battalion commander said, well, let's get everybody in together and tell them what to do. We did not immediately deploy. The only person that deployed was me. They sent my platoon up there. Mm-hmm. And so then they started, okay, they figured everything out, but it took them over an hour to figure out, you're going to come here, you're going to go here. Mm-hmm. All the company commanders came in there to, quote, figure out what they were going to do, mm-hmm. as opposed to immediately deploying, getting combat ready. You know, they've got to be around here. Yeah. You would, looking back, you would have thought that's what would have happened. But so then we get into, I go back and say, okay, here's the deal. And they said, okay, so you deploy. So I went back and did the other side of the LZ Albany, and 2 platoons of A Company, my old company, were doing on the perimeters. And the platoon on the right up there was going around and got just annihilated. And I don't think it took the North Vietnamese 40 minutes to kill every one of them. So then what happened is the North Vietnamese started coming around to where we were. And what happened was, Riscorla, this friend of mine, Rick Riscorla, who you'll hear about later, mm-hmm. I think, when we were in X-ray, had taken me around and said, look, don't go into the jungle. You got to back up so that you have fields of fire of at least 50 yards before they get in. So I was on the other side of LZ Albany, my platoon was, and mm-hmm. I said, you know, what did Riscorla say? And he was, I'm getting goosebumps telling you the story. And so I pulled my men back, and I said, I want to go back to this clump of trees where our battalion commander was, et cetera. So all hell broke loose. We got, my platoon sergeant and I got our guys, we brought them across the LZ and formed a perimeter, and that's where we held off all the North Vietnamese. We were joined by other platoons who were getting overrun, mm-hmm. et cetera. It was complete chaos. Mm-hmm. And in that clump of trees, we ended up with 60 men. We did not know that at the time. I thought it was a lot less than 60 men, I tell you. But we fell back to the clump of trees. And then we had with us an Air Force guy who was starting to call in the deal. We were just about to be overrun, and here come the A1Es, and they used a napalm. Mm. There were hundreds of North Vietnamese. Not 100, hundreds of North Vietnamese. And these guys flew these A1Es in, and we had to throw smoke out. We threw smoke out and said, don't go east of the smoke, because that's where we are. It's anything else is game. Mm-hmm. And the airplane started coming in, dropping napalm, and it was so close we could feel the heat. And so there was about 10 or 15 hours where it was just chaotic. Wow. But then, because we had outwalked our artillery, we had no artillery fire, because see, we had moved and the artillery was still moving, mm-hmm. and so all we had was the United States Air Force. I love Air Force guys. Uh-huh. And they were very brave and did a heck of a job. Mm-hmm. And so then what happened is that the 1st Brigade, now remember, Hal's guys had gone. They got them in base camp and says, you have to go back in there because the 2nd or the 7th is in real trouble. It was another broken arrow, except we needed people there too. We had gotten the aircraft, but we needed. And then Hal's guys got in the airplane, got in the choppers. And this is where it's unbelievable. I said, there's no way they could land here because we were on one side of the LZ and the North Vietnamese were on the other side of the LZ. I said, this is a suicide mission. Well, what happened was, though, they coordinated the aircraft coming in. I mean, I'm talking about the A-1E Sky Raiders, the Nupon, et cetera. And here come our Hueys behind them, and they could only get one platoon in before it got too hot for them. So they came in and landed. And that's when Rick Rescorla and his platoon came back and essentially saved us. So then we had enough people that we really got coordinated. Well, once the Americans got coordinated, we got the A-1Es, we got the artillery started getting in place. We were unbeatable, really. The North Vietnamese had mortar fire they would put on us, but they had no artillery to speak of, etc. So that's what really got us. And so after that, we were there, I don't know, 2 or 3 more days. If you look at the whole thing, this was the Americans. We lost more people than anybody than we did in the rest of the war for a particular engagement. And it set the tone for the war. And unfortunately, it set the tone in the wrong way. From the Americans' point of view, as history reveals later, which was we could hold our own against the North Vietnamese, we could win against the North Vietnamese, but it was going to be a war of attrition. It wasn't like Korea or World War II where we were going to go take a city and move. It was a war. We decided, the Americans decided, Johnson, etc., McNamara, this is going to be a war of attrition. And the North we did not realize the North Vietnamese were fighting. The North Vietnamese were fighting for their freedom, you know, and they were determined. And so we were determined for seven more years. So that whole battle set the tone. So when that was all over, we go back, and then we've got another 10 months of combat. And so then that kind of continued on, and then went on after I left, and then had to come back again. So that's the way the war went.
Early on, when you guys are there, are you already seeing the signs of this is not going to be the war fought the way it should be?
Well, not really. We knew what the first air cav was done. I mean, there were 2 things that went on, and people. You're asking really some good questions because people don't think about this. After we got out of that, and you remember now, the 2nd and the 7th was pretty well decimated. I mean, we had at least 50% casualties, if not more. And that's not, they weren't all dead, but there were some horrible wounds as well. And we used to say, where do you want to get shot? Don't you think we ought to raise our arm and take it in the arm because, we didn't want to lose a leg? I mean, that's the kind of mentality that you get into. But we were joking. I mean, it was like we were scared, we were frightened, knowing now, oh Jesus, this is what's going to be like the rest of the 10 months that we're here. And it was, that was a little bit sobering for us. A year later, when we get ready to leave, we leave out of Pleiku. And so the guys that we all kind of, we came together, so we're going together as opposed to 1 or 2 at a time. We get up to An, we get up to Pleiku, and the airplane lands. And by this time, this is civilian airplanes. I mean, this is like Delta landing. And the soldiers got off of that. Our replacements got off of that. And they looked over at us, and we still hadn't, they had showers and stuff, but we looked like old men. And we looked at these young guys and we were looking at us and we just said, you know, boy, you're in for a tough road here, because there was no more get to Berlin.
Yeah.
You know, there was no, and the war is going to end.
Yeah.
There was no end in sight to this thing. We were like, one of the things that we kept up with is how many air assaults did we make, combat air assaults. And in the next 10 months, I made nearly 100. Now, a lot of times, most of the time we would try to go to a combat air assault that there would be nobody there. I mean, that was the idea, is to get close to them, but not on top of them. Okay. And I would say in the 10 months that I was there, number one, none of them were as bad as the Ia Drang Valley.
Okay.
They weren't as bad. Because we had walked outside of our artillery. From then on, the strategy for all of us, not just for our unit, was we would say, okay, we're going to go into here. Then we would prep the L zone with artillery, and we would make sure that artillery was tuned in and could support us. See, we had walked out of our artillery range before because we had to get out of the way of the B-52s.
Right.
And then, of course, the Air Force continued, but the artillery was big to us, so that we would prep the zone. We would then walk into it. I would say we went into hot LZs. I bet you that in that next 10 months, I didn't go into a hot LZ, but maybe 6 or 7 times, and it was not anything like that, because that's not what we were trying to do.
Right.
Okay. So we got a lot better, but we lost a lot of guys still.
So we're sitting here today. Obviously, we're videoing this. Theoretically, your great grandchild may one day watch this video. What's one thing you'd want them to know about your military and your wartime experience?
That I'd want them to know that America is a great country, and we are so fortunate to be Americans. And we have to do our part in making America a great, safe country. And I think that serving in our military or in some capacity, I don't know what we will have in the future, space, military, or whatever, is a good part, and they should devote part of their life, at least several years of their life, to supporting America as a country.